So I'm sitting there the other day, scrolling through Amazon and B&H and just trying to figure out what gear should I buy next? How can I better myself as a filmmaker today? And I know, gear is not the most important part of filmmaking, and it's not what makes you a filmmaker, but it made me think back to when I was first starting out and I didn't know how to get started because I didn't know what gear to get. So that's why I'm making this list, this hypothetical list of what are the first 10 things you need when starting out as an indie filmmaker. The first thing on the list has got to be, it's the most obvious, a camera. You have to get a camera, and I know what you're thinking, I could film easily on my iPhone. Now with the release of the iPhone 15 Pro, it's getting pretty close, but I would still suggest investing in yourself a dedicated camera for photo and for video because that's what it's built for. Preferably a camera that has interchangeable lenses. To get the most bang for your buck, I would go with something like a Sony a7S III or the Canon R5, but if that's a little bit out of range of budget, you could also go with something like a Sony a6500 or a Canon M50. And Sony has come out with some really good cheap cameras as well within the Sony ZV line, specifically targeted towards content creators. And those are really good cameras to start off with as well. But as long as it has good interchangeable lenses and it has at least 1080p on it, you should be fine. Number 2 on my list has got to be some good lenses. If you can find yourself a good lens, you'll go a long way. They hold their value for years, sometimes even longer than the camera. There are lenses that were used in the 70s that were rehoused and they're still being used today as new lenses. I know most films are shot on cinema primes or just primes in general, but as your first lens, I would suggest going with a zoom lens. I shoot on the Sigma Art 24-70 f2.8. It's a good lens, but depending on what you're doing, you might need something a little wider or a little closer, a little more telephoto, but it's a good middle ground that has done me some good and been a great workhorse for me. I shoot weddings, films, music videos, you name it, I probably shot it. And if you can invest in some good lenses, it'll take you a long way. The next thing that I would suggest getting would have to be some good, high quality memory cards. I would suggest going with ProGrade or SanDisk. And of course, just because they're high quality doesn't mean they're gonna crash, but investing in those higher quality brands that are more reputable, it gives you a higher chance of you going home and having your footage still on your memory cards. That is not something that you want to call your client and say. So investing in some good memory cards, and especially something that'll hold them and protect them, this Pelican case is pretty good. So you've got your camera, you've got your lens, and you've got your memory cards. The next thing I would advise for you to get would have to be a good stabilizer. Doesn't have to be a gimbal, not just yet, or something expensive and fancy, but I would invest in something like a good tripod, monopod, even like one of those little cheap Gorilla pods, so that when you're doing something like an interview, you have some stabilization and your camera isn't all over the place shaky. A lot of your first jobs are gonna be interviews, so it's something that's really important that you really need. But not a gimbal yet. Hold off on a gimbal. Like I said, you're gonna be shooting a lot of interviews when you first start off. So before getting a gimbal, I recommend getting something that can capture audio. Using the onboard camera microphone it's all right, but it's not that good. It sounds terrible, actually. So I would suggest either getting like a boom mic, or if you want to get a lav mic, that's good too, or an on-camera, onboard microphone for when you're shooting events, that's good as well. But I would suggest getting something that is dedicated to audio because your camera is meant for shooting video, not for capturing audio. The next thing that I would invest in would have to be a laptop. If you don't have a laptop, you won't have anywhere to dump your footage at and edit on whenever you finish shooting. Specifically something with at least 32 gigs of RAM, especially when you're shooting in 4K, because your laptop will not be able to process it if you don't have at least 32 gigs of RAM on your computer. So you have everything you need to shoot a video, you have everything you need to send the video off to the client. Now you can start delving into some of those wants. And one of the first wants that I would go with would have to be lighting. I got tired of shooting everything outside, or it had to be daytime, or I had to use in-house lightings that look flat and ugly and just terrible. Lighting makes up for 90% of being a cinematographer, and without it, you wouldn't have that movie magic. You wouldn't have that look that you're looking for within a film. Amaran has got a lot of great choices. Godox does as well. You can even get a ring light, but get something that can add light to your image and make your image look 10 times better. So you have lighting, but everything just looks so bright and just blown out, and you can't recover any of your image because everything is just white. So that's where sunglasses for your camera come in at ND filters. ND filters are like sunglasses for the lens, and they help you recover the highlights and make it so that everything in the background of your image is not blown out and you can shoot into windows. So investing in a good ND filter is a great opportunity to expand what you can do. I use the Tilta Mirage. It's an expensive ND filter, but you can go with something like the Polar Pro. They have some good options, as well as Tiffin or KF. They all have really good options when it comes to ND filters. Once you got all of that stuff, I know I said that you'll be shooting a lot of interviews at the beginning, and you will, but you might want to shoot some stuff like weddings or real estate and not have a shaky image and not be able to just leave it on the tripod. That's where a gimbal comes in at. Having a good gimbal or glide cam, depending on your style of shooting, are two great options when it comes to needing stabilization for movement in your images, to create some dynamic movement in your images. I myself have a gimbal. I know a glide cam is a lot harder to learn, and it has, you have to have a tight core to use a good glide cam and have it look good. So I would suggest getting a gimbal. I have the DJI RS3 Pro, but they have a lot of cheaper options and more affordable options over at DJI, and Zhiyun has some good gimbals as well. But just, it's to each his own. Glide cams are a lot cheaper, but getting some good stabilization where you can have movement and it not be shaky, that is very important. So you have all of this gear just rummaging around in your car or all over your place, and it's just taking up all your space and it's just everywhere. That's where having a good backpack comes in. And not just any backpack, you need a camera bag. That's why I have the Peter McKinnon Nomadic. It's protected all of my gear thus far, and hopefully it continues to, because that would be expensive. And that wraps up this list of 10 of the first things you need as a filmmaker. And I want you to remember that it's not about having the most expensive gear. It's about utilizing what you do have and making it look better than someone that has the most expensive gear, because that's what filmmaking is about. It's about adaptability and being able to use the resources that you have to solve problems. It's not about the best paintbrush. It's about being the best artist. Thank you for tuning in to another video of mine, and stay tuned for more filmmaking tips. Keep creating. See you next time.